Oh, sure.
So thank you everyone for joining us today for this session on reassessment mapping survey designs to inform intervention strategies for soil transmitted helminths and schistosomiosis. Given the shifts in STH and schisto program targets from morbidity control to elimination as a public health problem, there's currently a need for refined, reduced cost impact assessment methodologies to assess program impact, which can then provide data to support the development of refined treatments and intervention strategies, as well as help facilitate decision-making in low prevalence settings. Today, we'll hear about 4 recent reassessment mapping surveys that aim to obtain a highly granular picture of STH and schisto prevalence undertaken in Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, and Zimbabwe, 4 programs supported by the Deworming Innovation Fund. The Deworming Innovation Fund, or DIF, was launched in 2020 and aims to accelerate progress towards eliminating STH and schisto in those 4 countries through innovative programming to better target, deliver, monitor, and sustain progress. Following the 4 presentations, we'll have some time for questions for each of our speakers before breaking out into small groups. Please feel free to add your questions to the Zoom chat throughout the session. The breakout discussions will focus on learnings from the surveys presented, including the current needs and considerations when designing reassessment mapping surveys in the context of interruption of transmission goals, such as the balance between data necessary to make decisions and available resources, as well as the interpretation of data to develop refined treatment strategies and what further adaptation of methods may be required when considering implementation at scale. With that, I'd like to turn over to our first speaker, Jean Bosco from the Rwanda Biomedical Center, who will be followed by Fikra Seif from the Ethiopian Ministry of Health, Florence Wakesho from the Division of Vector-Borne and Infectious Tropical Diseases, and Professor Nicholas Mizzi from the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bosco Mboniga from Rwanda and the program. I'm happy to share with you the experience of Rwanda about precision mapping of schistosomiasis and how this mapping has helped Rwanda to design adequate strategy for schistosomiasis elimination. I can start by the background of all designs that I've been using in the last 12 years, mainly in 2007, 2008, 2014, we have been using school-based mapping, still considering the faculty of schistosomiasis, as we have been selecting schools in sub-districts that were bordering water bodies. But in 2020, we shifted from school-based to community-based. Why? This was motivated by the fact that we wanted to eliminate schisto as a public health problem by 2024. So we needed to consider or to establish a profile of schisto in each age group. Second, we need also to be more precise by considering human-water contacts. That's why we adopt this innovative mapping design. And by procedure, we had, first of all villages, and then the information about the wetland ecosystem. With using GIS, we try to intersect those information. Then we end up having all villages that are adjacent to water bodies. Then those villages were extracted and they were given to all concerned health facilities to collect information on human water contact activities, but also closeness to water bodies, but also the household that are close to water bodies and type of water bodies. When this information was collected from all health facilities that are concerned, we tried to rank risk level of each village from 9 to 0. As you can see on the map under letter F, you can see the dark is 9, red 8, and so on. Then, what are now the factors that we use to rank each village? Number 1, type of water body. Score 2 was given to water bodies that are stagnant, like lake, water dam, ponds, wetland, and others. Score 1 was given to running water bodies like river, water, and score 0 was given to those type of water bodies that are really non-permanent, that can disappear in 1 or 2 days, or torrent as well. Factor number 2, type of human activity. There are activities that are exposing more people, that exposing at higher level people, like swimming, fishing, basic cultivation, fetching, crop or animal watering. This was given score 2, while other activities were given score 1. Now, factor number 3, estimated number of people using the water body. For the villages that had a water body, we would use at least of above 100 people was given score 2, while the others below 100 was given score 1. And for villages with at least the first house was in close contact with water body within 500 meters was given score 2, and above was given score 1. And the previously known endemicity, if the village was known to be in the previous area which was with the Shiso endemic, was given score 1, while if not, was given score 0. Then at the end, we had all villages scored, as you can see on the map G. Then you can see probably one district H, how it is ranked, the villages how are ranked from 9 to 0. And then from these ranked villages, we selected 10 villages in a district. And this district, which is under letter H, we selected 10 districts that, by considering 3 things. Number 1, the high-ranked villages were number 1 factor to consider when we are selecting 10 villages for the mapping. Number 2, it was the geographical distribution of the villages, how they are distributed within a district to be more geographically representative. Number 3, are all ecologies represented, like different type of water bodies represented? This factor also was considered when we were selecting 10 villages for our survey as a final site for data collection. Then, what were the findings? As you can see on the map in 2020, it has many red dots than the map of 2014, even than the map of 2008. Why? This is because we look at all areas that were really potentially to be having schisto, and this proves that we found many schisto in those areas. As you can see in the map of 2014, some districts do not have schisto, and this was for cattle cats. We used cattle cats for this map. And as you can see in 2020, almost all districts has schisto using cattle cats. This means going where schisto is can really be very helpful to track any case, any potential endemic area. Then what is the application for mass drug administration? Each area or village that was endemic or was having a high prevalence more than 10, 15, that was extrapolated to cell level so that we can have the prevalence at cell level. Then at that level was our MOD strategy designed, as you can see here on the right side of this map. Then, what is the impact in terms of numbers? Previously, we were targeting 127 sectors or sub-districts. Now we are targeting 283 sectors. The difference, it is more than double. Then, in terms of people who are targeted, previously we were targeting 1.1 million children. Now we are targeting 1.4 million children because of this new design. For adults, with the donation of milk, we are treating 2.9 million people, while previously we should be treating 2.1 million, a difference of 800,000 people, which is very, very critical for schisto elimination. Lesson learned. This community-based survey is very practical, effective, and when diligently planned and coordinated. Also, schisto history and ecologies are not really enough. We found out that even those villages surrounding water bodies are not really sometimes not endemic because they do not have human water contact. For our case, 51% of villages were excluded because they're not really at risk of schistoendemicity. And that's why we say better also to include in our mapping design this factor of human water contact. If we were about to redo the same mapping, we would also use the same strategy, the same mapping design, because it is really very, very adapted to our Rwandan context, but also would include small water bodies that was not included in the previous mapping, because I have been seeing that in tropical countries, temporary water bodies may also constitute transmission areas for schistosomiasis. Lastly, cattle really has some limitation, and it can underestimate the prevalence. And to acknowledge all partners, WHO, the Rwanda Biomedical Center, health centers, community focus, local leaders, and even Dante Fund, and providing funds and support for the running of this innovative design for schistosomiasis mapping in Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, apologize for the bandwidth issues, everyone. Our office internet, I think, is a little slow. Allison, would you like to use PowerPoints, or would you like someone else to try sharing the video?
I think we can try sharing the next video, but then if it doesn't work quite quickly, then we'll shift over and I'll have those on my end ready.
Okay.
Allison, Vanessa here. I'll try to share the videos on my end. And we are on presentation 2, correct?
Yes, we are.
Great. I'll share on my end.
Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Fikra. I work for the Federal Ministry of Health of Ethiopia. I'm the National Entity Program Manager. Today I will be presenting on the Ethiopia program experience on leveraging geospatial modeling technique to facilitate sub-district treatment decision for schisto and SH. The Ethiopia Schisto and SH National Control Program was started since 2013. After conducting a baseline mapping from 2013 through 2015. Following 5 years of preventive chemotherapy, the national program has planned to conduct a reassessment survey to determine infection level, post-treatment infection level, and refine implementation strategies focused to sub-district or Kabale level. As clearly indicated in the third national entity strategic plan, it calls for interruption of transmission of schisto and SH, defined as less than 2% community prevalence by qualitative polymerase chain reaction in all defined geographic area by the end of 2025. And we hope this that intervention decision at the cabinet level or sub-district level will shrink the map of both schisto and SH that enable us to focal resource use. Currently, the national program, since 2021, the national program want to conduct countrywide reassessment mapping by applying model-based geostatistical method as an alternative way to a two-stage cluster level, given that it would be an economically and programmatically more efficient approach to understand the prevalence of STH and schistosomiasis after intervention at national level. To do this, we followed a phased-based approach. The first phase was parameter calibration survey. The parameter calibration survey was performed in selected areas of Tigray and southern region to ensure the required level of data for sub-district level decision making and take into account post-treatment distribution of infections. The parameter calibration survey analysis evaluated potential geostatistical school-based sampling strategies to determine the most efficient design for phase 2, which is the national level reassessment mapping, and estimate the number of schools required for all sampling strategies at country level. Following the calibration mapping, we proceed to the national level reassessment mapping, which is phase 2. We used spatially regulated, as a design, we used spatially regulated minimum distance of 10 kilometers and 50% close pair approach. The aim is to detailed epidemiological understanding, to have a detailed epidemiological understanding of the distribution of schistosoma mansoni and hematobium, as well as STHs, including Ascaris lumbricoides, Trichuris, hookworm, and hookworm infections in all school-age children after multiple rounds of preventive chemotherapy across about 829 districts. This will provide us the ability to classify a Warada or sub-district level as above prevalence threshold of 10% to support decision on intervention at that level. In part 1 reassessment mapping, we already conducted in Afar, Dredawa, Harare, and Somali regions. A total of 1,961 sites were selected from the 4 regions, and 30 school-age children, which with age 9 to 40 years, were sampled from each site. The reassessment map, if we see the reassessment mapping result, the predictive model built using a range of environmental covariates or factors, which were then used to predict the prevalence of each infection across the 4 regions. The predictive mapping were then used to classify implementation units based on the certainty that prevalence exceeds intervention threshold. It may be 2%, 10%, 20%, and or 15% based on the national program decision. The result indicates a high degree of the presence of high degree of spatial variation in prevalence of schistosoma infection across different waradas and within a given warada itself. This supports that the refinement of treatment strategies for implementation at the Kabale or sub-district level is the most appropriate. Prevalence of schistosomiasis, which was species, was above the 10% threshold in about 14.4% out of 1,871 surveyed locations, and the prevalence of all species of STH is above 2% in about 53.3% of the surveyed locations. So this calibration, this geostatistical method of sampling method helps us to label infection categories, and based on the infection categories to propose the best suitable treatment strategy. For schistosomiasis, as you see from the graph here, the map here, some of the districts have less than 2% prevalence, which are not eligible for treatment in our context, and some of the districts have prevalence between 10 and 10%, and others have greater than 10%, which are targeted for annual MDA, and still others have greater than 50% prevalence, which are targeted for annual-based treatment with expanded population. And in case of schistosomiasis, as STH, there is also a high variability of infection prevalence across different implementation units. Some of them have very high prevalence, which is greater than 50% across the implementation units, and there are also hotspots greater than 50% in an area greater than 250 square kilometer, and others have prevalence of STH between 20 and 50. So based on the infection category, the national strategy proposed the following treatment algorithm or protocol. For schistosomiasis, if the assessment result is less than 10%, still the proposed strategy is under discussion. We are aiming to start facility level case treatment, which is case detection and treatment in all endemic areas, and for implementation units which have greater than 10% prevalence, annual praziquantel for school-age children and adults, and for those which have greater than 50% prevalence, annual praziquantel for school-age children plus adolescent and adults will be applied. For schistosomiasis, the implementation unit will be defined as Kabele or sub-district or village. For STH, the reassessment result, if the reassessment result is less than 1%, they will not be eligible for MDA. And if the result is between 1 and 50, treatment will be applied for school-age children, adolescents, and adolescents once a year. And for those implementation units which have greater than 50%, school-age children, adolescents, women of reproductive age group will be treated twice a year, and adults will be treated once a year. And for STH, the implementation unit will be Warada or district or Kabele, depending on the hotspot status. What are the learnings and future applications from this geostatistical sampling technique? It will help us to move to treatment planning with a mixed Kabele and Warada level treatment planning approach, with activities based on whether Kabele and Warada are above or below 10% prevalence threshold. In areas where sub-Waradas or Kabele's boundaries are less clearly defined, treatment strategy planning required additional communication and input to identify hotspot communities within that woreda. And the other most important thing is cost effectiveness and efficient analysis of the survey to be performed to compare the cost of survey with the estimated cost of treatment using the new sub-district level and the former district level treatment costs. Finally, I would like to thank the National Entity Program, the Ethiopian Public Health Institute, the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative Foundation, and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for their immense contribution for the program. I thank you.
My name is Florence Wakesho from Kenya. I'll be presenting to you our mapping and survey design that informs our treatment strategy. In 2019, the Ministry of Health launched the Breaking Transmission Strategy, which aims to increase all essential public health interventions with a focus on 4 preventive chemotherapy in neglected tropical diseases, namely trachoma, lymphatic filariasis, schistosomiasis, and soil-transmitted helminthiasis. The ultimate goal is to safely stop mass drug administration after sufficient reduction of infection. We have 3 pillars of the BTS. One is to increase both geographical and treatment coverage in all endemic sub-counties. Secondly, to expand the NTD WASH interventions. And thirdly, to mainstream behavior change communication interventions. The BTS, is in line with the SPEN objectives, which number 1 is to scale up treatment in all endemic regions to achieve 100% geographical coverage, and to scale down treatment where transmission has been interrupted. Since 2012, the Ministry of Health launched the school-based deworming program. We have seen commendable progress. However, from the pre and post evaluation since that was carried out between 2013 to 2017, we have seen cases of reinfection. This could have been attributed to the huge population that this strategy leaves out during treatment. This includes the adults, women of reproductive age, and also the preschool going children. Therefore, the program adopted a more intensified approach to include those who have been left out by the school-based deworming program. This is through the community-based treatment, where the program has been able to do door-to-door delivery, or actually use the mixed approach to reach all communities or persons in the community living in the endemic regions. In order to do this, the program initiated a process or a study just to understand where these at-risk population are. This will guide the program in decision-making for mass drug administration. WHO provides a clear guideline on how to conduct a mapping survey for schistosomiasis, where a very few schools, these are between 5 to 15 schools, are selected, and they decide for the entire districts. And the district, in our context, these are the sub-counties, which at times might lead to uncertainties or errors if the site selection and sampling are not properly undertaken. WHO provides very clear guideline on how lower levels can be selected. However, due to financial constraints, at times it's very hard to select all wards for mapping design. So this may result in either overtreatment or in some areas, and most importantly, undertreatment or no treatment at all in areas where treatment is needed most. WHO has again provided very clear guidelines on selection criteria for study sites. And this includes 1, areas where there is no transmission, selecting areas where there is no transmission, probably data from other surveys, from the clinical studies or other studies that have been conducted. Secondly, looking at the proximity of water bodies. In our study design, we were able to look at both the criteria that has been provided, and what we can be able to see, the schools that were selected were either near 500 meters from the water bodies, or 1 kilometer from the water body, or even 2 kilometers from the water bodies. So we selected 5 schools in every ward, and these are 155 wards in these 4 counties that we conducted the study. So this was a cross-sectional type of study where children between 8 to 14 years were targeted and enrolled. At least 46,500 were sampled out of the 155 wards in total from these 4 counties. Additionally, we were able to collect 20% of the preschool age children and adults as samples. This really represented that we wanted really to see the variance in prevalence and intensity vis-a-vis the school-based survey. Additionally, also, we were able to collect WASH information through WASH structured questionnaires from every child that was enrolled in this study. So these are the results of the schistosomiasis precision mapping in those 4 western regions. And what you can see, like in Kakamega, the results show that we have pockets, and this is at the very fine or lower levels. The studies were conducted at the ward level, where we do not have any infection at all for schistosomiasis. This really translates and says that even within a particular district, there are areas that there are variance in terms of prevalence, because you can see between Nzoia and Kongoni, they are still within the same sub-county, but there is variance of infection. Because in Nzoia, we are looking between 0.1 to 1.9. The next neighboring ward, we are having between 2.0 to 9.9%. For the BTS strategy, our treatment threshold is 2%. So an area like Nzoia did not qualify for treatment. However, an area like Kongoni qualified for treatment. So this really cuts out the variance of prevalence and intensity even within the same district. So basically, this just really is a table showing you the areas that were the areas that we mapped with the prevalence and intensity at different thresholds. For Bungoma, we have 45 wards, and out of the 45 wards, we had 13 wards that did not have infection at all. However, we had 17 wards that had above 2% that were enrolled for treatment at the end of the study. So in total, out of the 155 wards, we had 40 wards that were eligible for treatment. Again, because we use Cato-Katz method, we were able also to determine the prevalence and intensity for STH. Clearly, again, this is the same picture we are seeing like in Nzoia, where just a neighboring ward, we have area that has above 2%, and in Nzoia we have 0%. Really, again, this speaks about the variance of prevalence and intensity, even within the same ward, and this is for STH, which is known to be very heterogeneous in nature. So this is just a summary, and out of the 4 counties that were able to sample, at least 139 wards were eligible for treatment for STH out of the 155. So these are the program applications. This mapping enabled the program to have very accurate forecasting of medicines for both mebendazole and praziquantel. During our MDA, we were able to record 97% tablet utilization, meaning that were able to really clearly do correct forecasting of medicines that are required for these particular areas that are needed for, that has been mapped out for treatment. The survey also, as we have seen, has highlighted the variance of schistoendemicity within the same district. And then following the findings of this endemicity within the different regions, these particular counties have been able to request and to put PZQ as in their essential drug list, which was missing before because they did not know that they have this kind of infection, especially praziquantel, in their regions. This year, we were able to use these results to advocate for domestic resource mobilization in these counties. Of course, we had challenges in the field, which mostly were on poor infrastructure. And so in our next survey, we plan to have heavy vehicles 4x4 to mitigate these challenges. Additionally, you can see the samples are very huge. And so we are looking at having an additional human resource to really reduce this workload and enhance the quality. We had a very good teamwork, dedicated team leaders, and good coordination framework. This was important because of the complexity and the big nature of this study design. In future, what we have been able to realize just in these Western counties is that we were able to additionally treat 1.3 million people who benefited from praziquantel, who before could not benefit from this in this Western region. And therefore, the program plans to scale up the granular mapping to the remaining 1,166 wards out of the 450 wards on availability of funds. This is just to note that already we have done mapping in our coastal region, which has 130 wards. And out of the 130 wards now, we are implementing a schisto treatment in 72 wards. We want to acknowledge all the partners who worked with us, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Zimbabwe National Reassessment Survey for Schistosomiasis and Soil Transmitted Health. Background. The first national baseline survey to inform mass drug administration intervention strategies in Zimbabwe was conducted in 2010. In 2011, the country drafted a policy that specified annual mass drug administration, school-based mass drug administration in all districts declared endemic for schistosomiasis, regardless of prevalence-based treatment strategies specified by the World Health Organization. This was followed by 6 successful years of school-based mass drug administration in 2012 and 2017. In 2018, impact assessment of mass drug administration was conducted in all districts and schools that were included at baseline survey. Between 2018 and 2021, there was a temporal suspension of the school-based mass drug administration for schistosomiasis and STH. A decision was made to conduct a remapping survey to determine the effect of 4 years suspension of mass drug administration on the prevalence of schistosomiasis and STH before any community-wide intervention strategies could be implemented. There was also a need to determine the prevalence of schistosomiasis and soil transmitted illness at sub-district level to precisely estimate the population requiring treatment for the 2 round entities and the frequency of mass drug administration. Objectives. The primary aim of the survey was to provide a detailed epidemiological understanding of the distribution of schistosomiasis and soil transmitted helminthiasis in school-age children at world level after multiple rounds of preventive chemotherapy across Zimbabwe. The secondary aim of this survey was to describe the age infection profile of Eszemansoni, Eszematobium, Ascacillum ricoides, Trichuris trichyra, and hookworms across preschool age children, school age children, and adults after multiple rounds of preventive chemotherapy in school age children in a selection of archetypes in Zimbabwe. Study design. Existing data from the most recent impact assessment on Zimbabwe and a model-based geostatistical approach were utilized to enable 90% of wards to be correctly classified across the country when fitting a risk map to the resulting survey data and using this risk map to classify words. Predicted models developed using data collected during the last impact assessment were used to inform the probability of sampling areas. Thus, the survey oversampled in areas where there was confidence prevalence exceeded 2% and undersampled in areas where the confidence prevalence didn't exceed 2%. We also show the points where the schools, indicating the schools where the survey was conducted in Zimbabwe during the recent survey, and also communities where the survey was conducted in specified archetypes. Result. Schistosoma hematobium composite model recommendations. Words have been highlighted as exceeding 10% if there was a greater than 70% probability that prevalence isn't less than 10%. And with schistosoma mannsoni model recommendations, words have been highlighted as exceeding 10% if there is greater than 70% probability that prevalence isn't less than 10%. The overall prevalence of schistosomiasis disaggregated by age group. The studies demonstrated that schistosoma hematobium is prevalence of schistosoma hematobium is high in the school-aged children, followed by the adults, and less in preschool children. At the same time, the prevalence of HIV infection intensity is high in school-aged children, followed by the adults, and there is no HIV infection intensity in the preschool-aged children. The prevalence of S. mannsoni was high in adults, followed by the school-aged children, and it was also less in school-aged children. The prevalence of HIV infection with S. mannsoni was high in the adult population, followed by the school-aged children. And there is no HIV infection intensity in the preschool-aged children. This slide showed the predictive model for any soil-transmitted helminths. Best performing model included a spatial random effect with no covariates, including covariates leading to overfitting that is likely less reliable results, suggest that comprehensive treatment has reduced prevalence such that environmental drivers are no longer influencing distribution. The prevalence is focal and mostly in the east. Prevalence is not predicted to exceed 10% anyway. Model doesn't predict high prevalence in areas away from the survey points. Overall prevalence of soil-transmitted helminths aggregated by age group. The survey showed that the prevalence of soil-transmitted helminths is high in school-aged children, followed by the adults, and less in preschool children. The prevalence of ascarsulum leucoids is also high in school-aged children, followed by the adults and the preschool children. The same trend has been shown in the prevalence of hookworms as well as the prevalence of Trichoceres trichiura. Combined recommendations with a focus on which schistosomiasis species are present. Note well that soil-transmitted helminths prevalence is expected to fall between 2 and 10% as a population-weighted mean average by words in all areas indicated as greater than 2% STH. The dotted words indicate schistosomiasis only. The dashed words indicate soil-transmitted helminths only, and solid color indicate both schistosomiasis and soil-transmitted helminths. Discussion. The survey provided an opportunity for Zimbabwe to plan interventions at sub-district level. The survey focused mainly on school-aged children because they were both the age group that had received MDA over six successive years. It only included 25 sites where preschool-age children, school-age children, and adults were included. Community-based mapping of schistosomiasis and STH is expected to provide data on the prevalence distribution of the two entities by age group and hence inform appropriate population-wide equitable intervention strategies, leaving no one out. Since this is the first time the geospatial analytical methods were used in Zimbabwe to determine the prevalence of schistosomiasis and STH, there is a need to conduct a rapid validation assessment survey using traditional methods to inform on the efficacy of geospatial analytical methods in precise mapping of the two entities. Acknowledgements. The Permanent Secretary for Health and Child Care for the support, the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene for technical support and collaboration in the study, Schistosomiasis Control Initiative Foundation for the technical support and collaboration in the study, the Higher Life Foundation and the End Fund for the financial support to this initiative, National Institute of Health Research, technical and research experts for implementing the study comprehensively across the country, parents and children for their participation during the study. Thank you.
Thank you all for those presentations. I did want to open up to any questions, so please do add them into the chat and we'll be pulling some out. I wanted to start with a question for Professor Mitzi that just came in around the prevalence of schistosoma mannsoni and that it appeared higher in adults compared to school-age children or preschool-age children. I was wondering if you wanted to comment, Professor Mitzi.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison, for the question. You might as well have noted that schistosomiasis treatment in the region has been focusing more on school-aged children, and this has been a norm in Zimbabwe as well. So over the past 6 years, from 2012 to 2017, we were doing mass drug administration in school-aged children, even in high transmission areas. What it means is the prevalence of infection intensity was reduced by mass drug administration, although there was a suspension of MDAs for the period of 4 years. This could actually not have increased, to a larger extent or increased the prevalence of infection intensity in the school-aged children. But because the adult population has been missed out of mass drug administration, the prevalence of estimates on infection intensity was high, and it is acceptable because there was no treatment which could have reduced the infection intensity. Remember, treatment with praziquantel is aiming at reducing the morbidity by reducing the number of eggs that are actually deposited or that are trapped in the body. And also this is accentuated by reducing the number of worms that would be able to lay eggs in the body of the human. So with the children that have been receiving MDAs, they have actually been having the worms reduced in their bodies, and hence the infection intensity remained a bit low. But in the adult population, the worms continued to populate, to increase in numbers, and the infection intensity has appeared to be high, but it's not as high anyway. When we talk about preschool-aged children, these children, they are only able to get into water sources by the influence of their parents. And many of their parents would actually favor to leave their children away from water sources, and hence infection and reinfection with the schistosomes developing into adult worms is less in preschool age children, and hence the prevalence of heavy infection intensity is 0. Over.
Thank you, Professor Mitzi. I have a question that I think Florence may be well placed to answer around additional costs on testing large numbers of samples to get a precise picture of prevalence. And I was wondering if, in terms of the revised strategy, how does the amount of praziquantel and albendazole compare with the previous strategy?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Yes, of course, getting to the lowest level in terms of having that as your implementation unit means that heavily you will have to invest, especially at the beginning when you're doing the surveillance or the survey. However, as you start to do the implementation, you come to realize that there are areas that you do not really to treat, and so you don't need to consider them for your plan, and areas that now you need to consider. So talking about the effectiveness and the resource involved in terms of planning and the medicine that use the quantity, it can be vice versa. Number one, you might, and what we have seen, there are areas where we have had to include and increase the demand for the medicines that is being used, especially in areas where we did not have very focused sampling data, focusing on schistosomiasis. So we realize that we have new areas that we need to do interventions. So, but at the end of the day, what we realize as we continue to put this strategy and ensuring that we are treating is that there are areas that will need to drop off. And looking at our BTS strategy, where it is morbidity control focused, you realize it's interruption-based focused. Recently for WHO, where it is morbidity control focused, you can see that at this very beginning stages, we are really investing heavily. But then towards probably the next few years, you'll see us downscaling so much because there are areas that now entirely will not need to be treated because we've reached the interruption stage.
Thanks, Florence. It appears in the chat that there is quite a lot of interest in knowing if any cost analysis has been done. I'm not sure if any of the speakers want to comment on if that's been done so far or if this is planned. It may be a good topic for the breakout rooms. If not, if anyone wants to jump on mute, off mute now.
Yeah.
Alison, thank you so much. Sorry, John Bosco. Yes, even I included in my presentation, the national program is wishing to have a kind of cost analysis after completing the national mapping. So far we didn't do, but it depends. I mean, not only the mapping, but the program implementation, lower implementation level units will depend on the number of implementation units that comes into the program within a given district. And it also depends on the target groups we are going to expand. So yeah, in terms of drug, in terms of workforce, there are also issues related to burden that will bring a burden to the drug distributors. If we include a large number of people in a given implementation unit, it has its own disadvantage on the health system. So those things should be considered in the future.
Thanks, Vikram. John Bosco, I don't know if you had any additional comments there as well.
Yeah, just to highlight the case of Rwanda, instead of having reduced treatments to be delivered, we saw that the number increased of treatment that we have to provide. This is because some areas were not really targeted for treatment while they deserve to be treated. This is because of this new design. We found other areas that were really left behind. So currently, we see that the number of people to be treated for MDA plus Quantel increased for school children to increase around 300 people, 300,000, while for adults, the increase was around 800,000 people. So there's no really cost reduction, but in terms of elimination, we see that we are really trying to refine our strategy so that we can move quickly towards elimination of schistosomiasis as a public health problem. Thank you.
Thanks, John Bosco. I had another question for you, John Bosco, in relation to how the revised treatment strategy that's based on the mapping, how that will look like for schistosomiasis, and will treatment be expanded past school-aged children based on the results of the community mapping?
Thank you for the good question. We can see that almost all areas with schistoendemicity were considered in this mapping design, and even those low schisto-risk areas. And this is because all schisto-risk is related mainly to water bodies and wetlands, and human activities that are conducted in those wetlands. So we ensure that all water bodies are captured for the survey, and we end up finding all areas that should be really potential to schistosomiasis transmission. Then we are treating those which are eligible. This is because we want to go to elimination of schisto as a public health problem. And for the treatment, we expanded the treatment also to include adults as well for this new MDA strategy, because we have seen in some areas adults are most at risk than the young ones, as it was the case for Zimbabwe. And for areas with but few areas are receiving now MDA twice a year because we have this high endemicity, and the others which are in moderate endemicity, they are receiving now once a year, and those which with a low endemicity, they are receiving it twice a year. So expanding it to adults, but also including the preschool age children, we're exploring with Mark how we can include them as well in the MDA, so that we can be comprehensive in our strategy toward schistosomiasis elimination.
Thanks, John Bosco. A question for Florence. There's been some mention in the chat about sort of larger sample sizes and the amount of resources that are needed. I was wondering if the design that was used within the 4 counties would then be rolled out nationally or across other contexts, or only used in specific contexts? And what, if any, resource limitations may there be that the division is considering?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so in Kenya, we are planning to roll out granular or precise mapping to the rest of the other counties and the other wards remaining. As much as it looks like it is very resource intensive, I know WHO has provided guidelines in places where finance resources are limited. And I know with countries, they can be able to make a decision at which is the implementation unit based on the availability of resources that are there, and also looking at their strategy. So for Kenya, as I mentioned, our strategy is actually to interrupt transmission, and that is why we have gone to the lowest level of administration, and that is the ward level to do our surveillance, and those are our implementation unit as at now. So for the program, we are looking at rolling out the granular mapping in all the remaining wards that are remaining in the country. So again, also this really depends on the availability of resources countries has. WHO has very clear guidelines that was mentioned, where probably even a country can decide in the implementation unit probably to even take 3 sites for survey, just to be able to represent the other areas, not necessarily like the 5 schools we picked in every ward. So every country, based on the resources that they have and the strategies that they are looking at, they can be able to carry out precise sampling based on their strategy.
Thanks, Florence. I think we have time for one more question, and I wanted to ask Fikra in terms of the phasing that's occurred within the Ethiopia reassessment. How will the phased data collection affect the rollout of the revised strategy nationally?
So the reason why we wanted to have this phase-based approach is to make it feasible for the program to do nationwide mapping. We do have more than 800 districts to be mapped for eligible for reassessment. So really it is a huge to do all this mapping at a time. And there are also some insecurity in some of the regions. So some of the regions we are not eligible, we are not feasible for mapping during 2021 and 22. And that's why we divided the regions for mapping. But while we divide the regions for mapping, we tried to make it cluster. So we tried to select adjacent regions for to make it easy for the team for data collection and for the analysis as well to apply the geostatistical design. So the main reason is one, this is the main reason. And the other thing is the first, we did calibration mapping as I presented earlier. So the main reason for that phase was to test the new approach. So it has been piloted or used before in the entry program in Ethiopia. So it has to be calibrated first. And then we have to determine the maximum sample size that can inform a maximum, that can bring a maximum data for decision making. So that's why we used a phased approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Vikram. And so at this point, I'm going to turn to our organizers just to throw us out into 4 breakout groups to discuss a few questions. And then at the end, we'll be pulled back into the main session and sort of hear back from each of the groups before closing out. I'll hand over to you. Thanks. Have most people back. In our last 5 minutes, we'll just do a really quick sort of recap from each of the breakout rooms. I will kick off with some of the key messages from group 1, and we'll pass through group 2, group 3, and group 4 before closing out. And so our discussion really focused on where it makes sense to treat adults and how to use that data, as well as the importance of seasonality and how the timing of when you sample really could impact what you see. We also spoke about the use of modeling and how that can be really helpful in terms of looking at surveys and what they could then be used to inform and explore some of those setting-specific examples, but also around sort of when do you stop monitoring and the importance of that. I'll hand over to group 2. I'm not sure, Fikra, Cal, who will be reading it.
Thanks so much, Alison. So we discussed some of the questions that was posted. The first one is we discussed on about program sustainability by comparing the 2 approaches, the district-based or sub-district approach. From the Ethiopian experience, we think shrinking down the implementation unit to sub-district level will have more advantage in terms of program sustainability as well as in terms of accelerating the program elimination and so on. And the other important point is surveillance, the need for surveillance, especially in areas where the public health, the threshold for elimination as public health importance is achieved. Testing, early detection and treatment is very important here. Capacitating the workforce and the health system itself is very important. I think the main discussion points were there. Thank you. Over to you, Alison.
And over to Florence.
Yeah, so for group 3, we had interesting conversation on the geostatical. And from the discussion is that for the predictive modeling, of course, it's a little bit expensive, but as at now, probably it might not give us the accuracy, especially in those very lower levels, based on even the data that is available. So until probably we get a better modeling samples to predict, we might see ourselves really investing a lot in just having the surveys done in our conventional way. That was one. And then secondly, we looked at what administration units is precise to inform our treatment strategies. So this, of course, we said based on even the geographical administration and how it is done in your country, so that you can be able to really tailor and see this is the geography boundary between this lower level to the other lower level, just to be able to differentiate. And also looking at the focality, where do you really want to focus, so that that can also form as part of your administrative unit. I think those were the most core, unless I've missed out. Yeah, so the other one also was finding out about the environmental predictive. We said through that modeling presentation that was done, so one thing that came out clearly is that we really need to reassess our indicators year after year, so that we will closely monitor the other indicators to see whether they're really playing part in your surveys, or in your surveys rather. Yeah. So I think basically those are the three main points that we were able to discuss from our.
Thanks. Jean Bosco, Eugene, just wondering what the key messages were from our final group 4.
Yeah, group 4, we have been discussing mainly on a question about units to make or to select for a sample. And we were mainly discussing on this geospatial analysis, and also the conventional method as it was done in the group 3 of Florence. And we found out that the conversion is very, very logistic demanding, and it is even, you can even sample in one sub-district around the water bodies. One area may have a preference which is different from the other neighboring area, though they are all adjacent the same water bodies because of this complexity of shito transmission. So this was mainly the question we were discussing, and different ideas were mainly emerging on how better we can have the prevalence data that can guide the schisto program, mainly toward elimination. Eugene can complement with some other ideas.
Thank you so much, my colleague Jean Bosco. We also discussed the needs for building capacity in the countries, mainly on statistics, to just empower the people to do, to perform analysis, to calculate a representative sample. And also we found that the determination of the number of places to be surveyed depends also on the context, the local context. So we need to have time to discuss on other questions of interest, but we were also trying to brainstorm on the admin unit, which is sustainable and precise enough to inform the treatment decisions. So as we all know, the implementation was moved from district to sub-district level, and for some countries, even at lower level, still the recommendation of WHO. So better at district, or even better at lower level. And in Rwanda, we are using the admin cell, which is lower than a sub-district. So I think better down at lower level, it's where we are going to really target the people in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time today to join the session. And I apologize for some of our technical issues at the beginning. We will be sharing the slides, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and tomorrow. Thanks so much.